All things are receivers. New coming vets, rookies, and homers will make for some competitive camp battles. Cody and I discussed the pecking order for the Texans wide receiver core and who should be considered the number one target for CJ Stroud.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp helps you connect with a licensed therapist who can help you get on that self-discovery journey from wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. I'm Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, and of course, I'm joined by none other than Sports Illustrated's own and Houston Sports Media Credential Media member for the city of Houston. Said a whole bunch of things right there. But, of course, Cody Davis. For today's episode, we will talk about an anonymous NFL executive and what they had to say about the Houston Texans that is really on the brighter side compared to the past 2 to 3 seasons. Who should be the number one receiver for the Houston Texans? But before we look at who should be number one, Cody, it's great that we have an opportunity to discuss the receivers all together. The Texans currently have 7 receivers on the roster that were not Texan last year. Houston has 4 players on the roster that didn't play on an NFL field last season. Only 2 receivers currently of the 4. Only 2 receivers on this roster currently has 4 or more years of NFL experience. The Texan wide receiver group isn't where the franchise would like it to be, of course, but there is no doubt that this is a team in a much better position than last season. I think especially from an athletic standpoint, and the group is younger. Now, Houston doesn't have a number one receiver, and we will discuss who that should be, but I am excited to see the following. The rookie battle, Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson. I'm also going to include John Mechie in that group, and of course, undrafted free agent Jerry Wayne out of Pitt. The newcomer vet battle, Noah Brown versus the $10 million guarantee wide receiver in Robert Woods. The role of Amari Rodgers. He is one of 4 receivers on this roster that is under 6 foot, and of course, wide receivers fighting for roster spots that would be a part of the depth. Jalen Camp, Johnny Johnson, Steven Sims, and I also want to include Jerry Wayne in that as well. And of course, like I mentioned, who will be this team's number one receiver? Cody, how should we feel about the wide receiver group as of right now? How should that position group for the Texans be viewed?
Okay, that's how you have to look at it. Because the Houston Texans, I think we all can agree, they do not have a definite number one wide receiver. However, when you go back and compare it to last year and the year before, the one thing that we all talked about and hampered on for 2 seasons now was that this wide receiving core just did not have a lot of depth. If Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins went down, it was like, okay, who's going to step up? Thankfully, they had Chris Moore, but outside of Chris Moore on several occasions, you really didn't know who was going to take the helm. I'm looking at it in tiers. I look at it in tier 1. I have Nico Collins, Noah Brown, Robert Woods. Tier 2, I have Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie III, and Amari Rodgers. And in tier 3, I have Jalen Camp, Johnny Johnson III, Steven Sims, and of course, Jerry Wayne. That's how I'm looking at this. Tier 1 is your, okay, we're going to need a lot of production from you every single Sunday, and you guys cannot let us down. Tier 2, those are the guys that I'm looking at that I say, okay, there are the ones that's going to be in position battles to play the slot receivers. Or if somebody from your one goes down, from tier 1 goes down, then you're going to have to make sure that you rely on those guys from tier 2. And then the tier 3 receivers are the ones that's going to be like, okay, who's going to fill out the rest of this position group to make the 53-man roster, and how many of those guys is actually going to be on the practice squad roster. The biggest key out of all of this as of right now, John, for me, is Amari Rodgers. I'm looking at him only because he's the only one I feel that you could play him on the outside, you could play him in the slot, you could play him wherever. He took on the role as Chris Moore, somebody to where if you needed him to step up and be your number one, number two wide receiver due to injury, due to durability, due to production, that was him. When you needed somebody to step up in the slot, that was him. So I'm looking at it in terms of production and how the Houston Texans coaching staff can actually utilize him.
Fun fact, there is no receiver on this team that was drafted in the first round. So this is a team at that position, Cody. When you say it's okay, I think it's fair to say that it is okay. More so, there is only one receiver on this roster as of right now that have caught for 1,000 yards, and that was Bobby Trees, Robert Woods, back when he was with the LA Rams. And so he does come in with a lot of experience, the more NFL experienced receiver on this team. As I mentioned, only, what was it? Only two of the current receivers have 4 years or more of NFL experience. But I do want to look at this. This maybe be a not so hot take. I can't see Noah Brown not making this roster. He's on a 1-year deal, a very inexpensive contract worth $2.8 million. Also, after being acquired from the Packers once he was released, Amari Rodgers, who I liked for Houston last season, has had some good moments with some bad quarterback play. Both of those players have players, rookies at their position that'll play similar roles for this team. When I look at a Tank Dell and the Xavier Hutchinson, Hutch is more of an outside receiver who can do some blocking downfield, make some of those plays on the outside downfield. In his last year in college, got a really good opportunity to get 100 catches, so was really utilized in the offense. And Tank Dell, a smaller guy, can be utilized in the return game, in the slot, some of those things that you want to get creative with. You can use Tank Dell. And so when I look at what Amari Rodgers could possibly be, I wonder if the upside for Tank Dell, who Houston traded up for, means more to the franchise as of right now than a wide receiver who was released from the Green Bay Packers going into his 3rd year this year, who may be an odd man out. And then when I look at this wide receiver group, guys, listeners, viewers, if you're watching at home or if you're listening in your car, you know what's really going to make or break a lot of these receivers. Like right now, Houston has, I want to say, 11 receivers on this roster, maybe 12. And I think that when it comes down to how many they're going to carry on game day, like we used to see 4 or 5 last year. I think one game, a couple of games, maybe was 4 receivers. I think that number will increase, as I said before. But I'm going to look at the small things that can help that player fit the mold of this team and the identity that DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Sloak, that they're trying to establish for an offense that's been bottom of the league for the past 2 seasons. And that's going to be blocking downfield. That's going to be, how are you working out in the zone run game as a wide receiver? What are you doing? Are you doing your part with backside blocking? Like those small things is what I'm really looking forward to. So that's why I said, looking at Amari Rodgers, what will be his role? Like training camp is going to be super, super, I think, exciting for all of these receivers, because when you look at the veterans and when you look at the rookie class and the rookies and the younger guys like a Nico Collins, who's going into his 3rd year, Amari Rodgers, 3rd year, same draft. Like you have another guy that can compete with you, whether they are the vet or whether they are the rookie, the younger guy. And I look at John Mechie, like John Mechie at his height, his ceiling, his potential is to be able to do everything on the field as a receiver. Outside, inside, slot guy, right? You don't want to necessarily have him out there with too many returns, but like talking about Tank Dell, he's a guy that how many of those kickoff return was called back?
He had 6, and then 4 was called back.
So he's also going to be an X factor, something that Houston hasn't had maybe since Jacoby Jones in the return game. So, like, again, the receiving group for Houston is going to be super competitive, more competitive than we've seen in a couple of years, because I think there's a balance from top to bottom, to where the guy that you have, the two guys that you may have at the top, there's also some younger guys that may be quicker and faster at their point of their career that can kind of do the exact same thing that the vets can do. It's going to come down to how are you practicing? Are you doing the things that they want you to do when you're not getting targets? Are you in the film room? Are you taking care of your body? And are you committing to this type of style of offense that D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slower, Bill Lazor, Shane Day, now with CJ Stroud, that they're putting together? This show was sponsored by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you, and you never take the moment to think about what you need from yourself. But when we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched, thin, and burnt out. I'm dealing with it every day, coming home from work, doing things for everybody else. And sometimes I need a peace and moment to myself, but I don't necessarily know how to do that. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life. It helped me, and I want everybody to be able to help themselves. You can find different type of ways to support yourself, support others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. You don't have to drive in this 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock traffic here in Houston or wherever you are, because traffic is bad, gas prices are high, and it's easier to do things at the comfort of your own home. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers out there, and especially our everydayers out there, man. As always, you guys are. Can I say something, Cody?
Go right ahead, man.
A couple of things, man. So, one of the bigger reasons why I love doing this show is because it's honestly a break for me. I get opportunity to speak with my brother, get opportunity to speak to you guys, and there's so much going on in the outside world. My goodness, the mass shootings, the craziness, and for you guys to rock with our show like that, it means the world to me. So once again, our everydayers, we really appreciate you here on the Locked On Texan podcast. Now, I know y'all want to get back to some of them Texan talks, so let's do that. Who should be Houston's number one receiver this year, which should probably be named what are our expectations for Nico Collins this year? Cody, I do want to give out some information before we talk about Nico. The unfortunate story of Nico Collins as a pro athlete to this point in his career. Mm-hmm. This will be his third head coach in 3 seasons. This will be his third OC, which means this will be his third offensive system. I'm doing everything in 3. And for the third point I want to point out, this will also be his 5th starting quarterback. Like, if we could take a moment, in 3 seasons, David Culley, Lovie Smith, now D'Amico Ryans.
Tim Kelly,
Pep Hamilton, now Bobby Slowick. And Davis Mills, Tyrod, Jeff Driscoll, Kyle Allen, now CJ Stroud. So maybe we look at the third time is the charm. However, that's the business of the NFL, right? You know, you can't always control things around you. But Nico Collins should absolutely have the expectations for himself to be this team's number one wide receiver. Cody, you mentioned it all the time. One of the better quotes from Nico Collins was he wants to be where DeAndre Hopkins has been for this franchise. And if we're being honest, for Brandon Cooks for a couple of seasons. His second season woes mainly was from the quarterback play. Didn't really give Collins justice to how much better of a player and wide receiver he was from his rookie season. His routes were better. Creating separation was better. And when I look at how important it is for Nico Collins to come out this year and be this team's dominant wide receiver, and I'm going to say the number one receiver with an offensive system and scheme that we're expecting to see from new offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, which is somewhat of a variation of the West Coast offense. You bring that system, you typically see a bigger jump in year 2 for the wide receiver. So we look at Deebo Samuel, his year 2 compared to his rookie year. We look at Brandon Ayuk, year 1 from year 2. Both of those numbers increased in that type of system. And I think it'll be better for Collins to come out this year and stand out above everybody else in that position group to be this team's number one receiver in order to get an opportunity to see year 1. So I don't want to necessarily put an expectation of him being a 1,000-yard receiver. And again, guys, I want to reiterate that for Nico Collins, how much better of a player he was last year, you didn't get an opportunity to see it. Like I say this all the time, there was at least 250 yards, 300 yards left out on the field because of how bad the quarterback play was. That's why I think that this is the season that next January, we may look at ourselves and say, okay, Nico Collins can possibly build himself up, not to the likes of DeAndre Hopkins and Andre Johnson. I think that's unfair to the young man, honestly. Like, those were two of some of the greatest receivers we've seen in this NFL league. But we can say, you know what? He definitely needs to be a priority in this offense for the following year, in an offense that normally does take the better receiver or the receivers a year or two to really catch on. So I'm expecting a lot of great things out of Nico Collins, and I think that it's okay for us to say, as of right now, Nico Collins should be the number one receiver for this team. Now, Cody, guys, he got a different perspective, and I can't wait for y'all to hear it.
I agree with you, John. Everybody should agree. When you take a look at these 11 wide receivers entering training camp, Nico Collins should be the number one wide receiver. There's only 2 other guys that you can look at that I would say could rival Nico for that position. That's Noah Brown and Robert Woods. But Nico Collins, he is the best option. He's the tallest wide receiver. I do believe with CJ Stroud, we will finally see Nico Collins be that red zone target, that red zone threat that we wanted to see between him and Davis Mills last year, which means there would be more scoring for the Houston Texans down in the red zone. He's 24 years old, so he matches up perfectly with the Texans' timeline in terms of their rebuilding project, or as B. Scott said on yesterday's show, the building project now, because he feel like this team is out of the rebuilding stage. Now it's like, okay, we got to put these pieces together and really start building something special. And then, John, everything that you just said, especially considering that he has the best quarterback that he has ever played with. And I know that's saying a lot for a rookie quarterback. We don't know how his talent is going to translate from the college level to the NFL, especially from Ohio State. However, CJ Stroud will probably be the best quarterback that he has ever played with here in the city of Houston.
Can I add something to that?
Oh, go right ahead.
What I do want to add is more so, let's not necessarily say the better quarterback, which I think he will be the better quarterback, but we can say that. But let's also put an emphasis on the importance of adding to this coaching staff a better scheme. Like Bobby Slowick, which we may have question marks about how he will be as an offensive coordinator, rightfully so. But what this team has this year that they did not have in the past year, you got Bill Lazor and Shane Day. Like, we cannot count out how important those guys are going to be for the entire offensive scheme and offensive players. And so I think that Nico Collins will truly benefit from that in the style of offense that I think this team will play for, because I think CJ Stroud will benefit from heavily as well as a rookie. So I do believe that the wide receivers will as well. So I want to point that out as well.
I'm glad that you did. But, John, I don't want to talk about who's going to be the number one wide receiver for the Houston Texans in 2023. Who's going to be CJ Stroud wide receiver 1 in 2023? I want to look at who's going to be wide receiver number 2. That is the interesting question, because the reason why it's so important to see what the Houston Texans are working with in his wide receiver groups, because you have a rookie quarterback. And it seems like you want to make sure that your quarterback, your rookie quarterback, have enough veteran talent around. Nico Collins in his 3rd season, but Noah Brown and Robert Woods are, without a shadow of a doubt, the veteran group of this wide receiving core. I have some faith in Noah Brown. However, John, I'm wondering if the career year that we saw out of Noah Brown in Dallas is more so because he was playing alongside the likes of CeeDee Lamb, who is, of course, without a shadow of doubt, the Dallas Cowboys' #1 wide receiver. And if he comes to the Houston Texans, or matter of fact, when he starts playing for the Houston Texans this season, because they do not have a #1 wide out that they can put more emphasis on in their defensive scheme, I'm wondering that's going to hamper Noah Brown's production. Now you got to take a look at Robert Woods. Robert Woods is getting up there in age. Robert Woods is coming off a season where he recorded a career low of 527 yards, and I understand it. He was with Tennessee last year. There was a lot going on with Tennessee. They had a quarterback in Malik Willis. They didn't want him to throw the ball past 5 yards against the Houston Texans, which is the reason why they had to go out. The reason why they had to go out and draft Will Levis. But look, he's not here to sit in Houston. That's all I care about. But what is this wide receiver battle is going to look like in training camp? I'm looking at 3 guys who could be wide receiver #2 for the Houston Texans: Noah Brown, Robert Woods, and Xavier Hutchinson.
Wow.
I think he's going to be.
Whoa. No, John Mechie?
The only reason why I'm not putting John Mechie in is because he hasn't played football in a long time. He's coming off leukemia. He's coming off an ACL tear. And to be honest with you, John, outside of him, I think this year is going to be him just getting back into football shape and just trying to get accustomed into the NFL level. Ladies and gentlemen, please, without a shadow of a doubt, we cannot put too much emphasis on John Mechie this season. We cannot do it. This man has overcome a lot. And the fact that the fact that he is right now participating in voluntary OTAs, and he's going to be at training camp. And if everything continues going well, he's going to be suiting up on Sundays. He's going to be a part of the 53-man roster. That is enough right there. But we have to have some patience with the development of John Mechie, because this guy has to overcome a lot. Now, 2024 is going to be a whole nother different story. But as of right now, when you look at wide receiver #2, I think Xavier Hutchinson is going to be the key to say whether or not, along with Amari Rodgers, but I don't see Amari Rodgers being wide receiver #2. I see him being 3 and a guy that you can call up when needed. But Xavier Hutchinson, he has a lot of talent. He's coming off a career year at Iowa State. This man has made the all Big 12 first team, not 1, not 2, but 3 times. But even when you take a look at what Hutchinson can possibly be for the Houston Texans, along with Brown, along with Woods, John, I think wide receiver #2 is going to be more so of a collective unit between those 3 guys, because it's very important for these wide receivers to step up in order for CJ Stroud to be successful in his rookie campaign.
You know what? Let's continue this conversation just a little bit before we close out with the anonymous NFL executive, because I think we got some cooking right here. So, guys, more wide receiver talk coming up on the Locked On Texans podcast. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. I got to clean up the kind of last part of that conversation, finish it up, Kurt. I like what you were saying, just a collective unit of guys.
Which goes to the depth that Nick Caserio has been able to build this offseason in his position group.
Absolutely, which is why there is an emphasis. It should be an emphasis on this team won't just carry no 4 receivers going into game day. Like, they got guys on this roster that I think a suitable offense can really bring out their strengths, what they can do on the NFL field. But you did say something that I thought was interesting, the Noah Brown being a #2 receiver. I don't think so. And my belief is there is an opportunity, right? And we've seen Nick Caserio give a guy some money before in the offseason, and then when the season rolls around, sayonara. Like, we were still scratching the head over why did Marlon Mack make this roster and Rex Burkhead did, right? I know that's pain from the past.
Don't
we don't want to talk about that trauma.
Don't bring that up.
but I could see Noah Brown being an odd man out, honestly, because like I look at Xavier Hutchinson, who unfair to say to Xavier in a sense, he hasn't played NFL football, but Noah Brown, who has gotten better every year since coming out of Ohio State for the Dallas Cowboys, Like last year was just a perfect opportunity for him because of the lackluster talent around that wide receiver group. Like the rookie Tober didn't do much. Gallup got hurt. And so Brown was able to step up and play some good football. But when the competition is brewing is here in Houston, like will those opportunities still come to him if everybody else is performing at a higher level? And I also want to add that this team may possibly not have a number one or number two receiver. They may just all collectively be getting it in and be effective for this team. I think that at the end, we may look at Nico and say you were the better option. But Robert Woods, if he's healthy, this could be an opportunity for him to go out there and act a fool too. So, like, this is, of course, the two early conversations that we're having.
Yeah.
But collectively as a unit, I think this is why this offseason for the wide receiver position is so interesting, because who's really the clear-cut better than the next guy man?
To your Noah Brown point, do you think what he had to go through last year in Dallas? Because like I just mentioned in the second segment, the clear-cut number one was CeeDee Lamb. Outside of Lamb, John, as you just alluded to, he needed to step up. It was an opportunity. You don't think he has that here in Houston?
I don't think he will. I think there'll be opportunity, but like the opportunity came for Noah Brown last year, and the opportunities kept coming because who else was going out there able to like make plays for Dallas? Like that's why Dallas called Houston before the deadline and was like, hey, can we get Brandon Cooks? That's why they just got the deal done in the offseason, because they needed somebody who could stretch the field.
Yeah.
Like, even when Gallup came back, it just wasn't the same Gallup, you know. And Tobert again, the rookie, he wasn't able to go out there and do nothing for Dallas. And so what I'm saying is, with those opportunities that continuously came last year for Noah Brown, that may shrink for Noah Brown because other guys are just getting out on the field and may have a higher upside to be out on the field compared to Noah Brown. I'm not counting Noah Brown out. I actually like the signing of Noah Brown. If I remember correctly at the time, I liked the Noah Brown signing more than I liked the Robert Woods signing, but that was because of the amount of money, right? And so I think that he's going to get an opportunity, but will his opportunities look better than the opportunities of the Rook Hutchinson? Robert Woods, the we can't count out the guy like the Jalen Camps. We can't count those guys out. So will he look better than the rest of the guys in camp and in preseason and so forth throughout the season if he makes it to the 53-man roster? I think that's a valid question to ask. Not doubting him, but it's out there.
I think Jalen Camp got a real chance of messing up almost every scenario we just put out there, because Camp did go out there and was productive whenever he was called up from the practice squad roster. However,
he looked good in training camp.
That was
too,
and in preseason. I never understood. But John, that goes back to your point about saying that we are not going to get the 53-man game day roster and say you're only rocking with 4 wide receivers. No, and so, which means that could open up more opportunities for Jalen Camp, and that's another guy who can give you something on special teams as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this wide receiving core shapes up. However, come the end of the 2023 campaign, we better be saying, Nico Collins, it's your time. Because if not, we're going to be saying, Nico Collins, I'm gonna miss you, man. I hope you do well in your next, your next team. Goodbye. I'm gonna appreciate those talks we used to have at your locker, man. But man,
it's time to go. Boy, look how happy folks get around the talk of wide receivers when the quarterback different.
Boy,
look how the energy changed. Really quick before we end off today's show, man. An anonymous NFL team executive had this to say about the Houston Texans. You guys are going to like this. They were sitting out the last few years, and now they've re-entered the NFL world. And that is in regards to the Houston Texans. I just think I don't want to necessarily analyze that too much, but I just think that is a part of the feel good, right? Like you traded up. You got the 2 top prospects that was on your draft board. You had a great offseason, got the head coach. And just as another point in the feel-good story for the Houston Texans. Now, of course, the real story ain't going to really matter until August 2023 and then the second weekend in September. But, like, to hear NFL executives say that, okay, all right. You know what that tells me? Now we have some real expectations. Not no 4 wins, not no 3-13-1 type of season. The expectations are there.
Yeah. And for me, as someone who has been around this team ever since the downfall started, that statement to me also showcased that the sideshows and all of the bad narratives and the cloud that was hanging around this organization for over the last 3 years is gone now. Like everywhere. We're not about to get into all that because, ladies and gentlemen, you already know everything that was going on. But I do want to say this, man. Even when you take a look at the coaching search, it was a legit coaching search. It wasn't we about to go and bring in Hans Wars. You know, we're not about to talk about hiring Josh McCown and like even the coach, like they had legitimate coaching candidates. And honestly,
Wall this year,
and honestly came away with like a guy who had suitors around the league. And you saw how they crashed the draft. You come away with not one but 2 prospects that was in the top 5 in free agency, and the fact that they still have flexibility going into next offseason. It's a good time to be a Houston Texans fan. This is a good time to be covering the Texans finally. Yeah. Ever since they blew that lead to Kansas City, Lord have mercy.
Thank you guys for checking it out.
Sometimes you just gotta say it like that and just leave it.
You know what? You never know where you're going if you don't know where you came from.
There you go.
One of the darkest, should we go left or should we go right type of dark turns for the Houston Texans has been maybe looking at the 06 draft, not being able to not committing to Peyton Manning over Matt Shaw, and that 24-0 lead that if you win that game.
And in hindsight, drafting 4, they're giving all that money to 4. How the way that came out to be. So,
only thing you do is pray for better days, man. Thank y'all for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to follow us on all of the major podcasting platforms, as always, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Megaphone, and Spotify. Also, while you're scrolling on your phone, hitting the subscribe button, scroll over to YouTube and hit subscribe on that as well. Like, comment, please comment, and shout out to our everydayers. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, remember, we're going to have our first chance to see CJ Stroud and the rest of the 2023 rookies in action on Friday. Can't wait to talk about that and give y'all footage on that. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
The fun is back.